Dr. Ethan Blackwood's fingers tightened on the steering wheel as he guided his Tesla Model S through the winding coastal road. The Pacific glittered to his right, a stark contrast to the turbulent thoughts churning in his mind. He was returning early from a medical conference in Tokyo, eager to share news of a breakthrough in his neural implant research with his wife Lydia. The car's tires crunched on the gravel driveway of their modernist home perched on the cliff. Ethan killed the engine, grabbed his overnight bag, and strode to the front door. He punched in the security code and pushed it open, the scent of home washing over him. "Lydia," he called out. No answer. Ethan frowned, noticing a pair of unfamiliar leather Oxfords in the entryway. Men's shoes. His spine stiffened as he heard muffled voices floating down from his private study upstairs. He recognized Lydia's lilting laugh, followed by a deeper, masculine chuckle. Julian, his childhood friend and business partner in neurotech. Ethan's heart raced as he silently ascended the stairs, his medical training kicking in as he noted his own physiological responses to stress. Elevated heart rate, constricted pupils, dry mouth. The study door was ajar. Ethan peered through the gap, his world tilting on its axis. Lydia, brilliant biochemist and love of his life, was locked in a passionate embrace with Julian. Her fingers tangled in Julian's hair as he kissed her neck. Confidential neurotech documents were strewn across Ethan's desk, forgotten in their fervor. Ethan's first instinct was to burst in, to confront them both with righteous fury. But something held him back. The analytical part of his brain, the part that made him an exceptional neurosurgeon, took control. He retreated silently, grabbed his keys, and drove to a nearby beach. The sun was setting as Ethan sat on the sand, waves crashing before him. He spent hours there, processing the betrayal and formulating a plan. This moment marked a turning point in Ethan's character. He decided to approach the situation with calculated precision rather than emotional outburst. The Boy Scout was dead. In his place, a new Ethan was born, one who would use every tool at his disposal to uncover the full extent of this betrayal. The next morning, Ethan strode through the gleaming halls of Oceanic Memorial Hospital, his expression betraying nothing of the turmoil within. He had a high-risk surgery scheduled, a rare brain tumor threatening the life of Mayor Karinjan. As he scrubbed in, Ethan fought to focus on the task at hand. But unbidden memories of Lydia and Julian intruded, threatening his legendary composure. "You're sure you're okay to operate, Dr. Blackwood?" asked Dr. Zara Hassan, a talented third-year resident assisting on the procedure. Her dark eyes studied him intently. Ethan nodded curtly. "Let's begin." The operating room hummed with tension as Ethan made the initial incision. His hands moved with practiced precision, navigating the delicate landscape of Mayor Zhang's brain. But as he approached a critical juncture, Lydia's face flashed in his mind. Julian's laugh echoed in his ears. Ethan's hand trembled almost imperceptibly. Dr. Hassan noticed. Without a word, she adjusted her position, subtly steadying Ethan's hand. The moment passed, crisis averted. Hours later, Ethan emerged from the OR, exhausted but successful. Mayor Zhang would live to see another term. As he updated the mayor's anxious staff, a gruff voice interrupted. "Dr. Blackwood?" "Detective Marcus Ortiz." "Got a minute?" Ethan turned to face a stocky man with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes. He knew Ortiz by reputation, a tenacious investigator with a knack for solving cold cases. "What can I do for you, detective?" Ethan asked, keeping his tone neutral. Ortiz pulled out a notepad. "I'm looking into the disappearance of Dr. Victor Cho. Board member here, right? And an early investor in your company, Neurotech." Alarm bells rang in Ethan's mind. "That's correct. But I'm afraid I don't know anything about his disappearance." "Humor me. Document. What was Dr. Cho's involvement in your research?" Ethan chose his words carefully. Dr. Cho provided initial funding and guidance, but he wasn't involved in the day-to-day operations or the specifics of our neural interface technology. Ortiz's eyes narrowed. "Interesting. Because word is, Cho was making noise about some breakthrough just before he vanished. Any idea what that might be about?" "I'm sorry, detective. I can't help you there." Ethan's mind raced. Could Cho's disappearance be connected to Neurotech's recent advancements? And if so, how did it tie into Lydia and Julian's betrayal? Ortiz studied him for a long moment before nodding. "All right, document. Thanks for your time. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon." As the detective walked away, Ethan felt the weight of yet another complication bearing down on him. He now suspected corporate espionage on top of the personal betrayal. The stakes were growing higher by the minute. That evening, Ethan pulled into his driveway, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He entered the house to find Lydia in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up, smiling warmly. "Hey, stranger. How was the conference?" Ethan made a split-second decision. He would play along, testing his own ability to maintain the charade while observing Lydia for any signs of guilt or deception. "Enlightening," he replied, moving to kiss her cheek. He felt her stiffen almost imperceptibly at his touch. "How are things here?" Lydia turned back to her chopping. "Oh, the usual. Julian stopped by yesterday to go over some Neurotech financials." "Did he now?" Ethan kept his voice casual as he poured himself a glass of wine. "Find anything interesting?" Lydia's knife faltered for a fraction of a second. "Nothing earth-shattering. Just routine stuff." Ethan nodded, taking a sip of his Cabernet. "Well, I'm famished. What's for dinner?" Their interaction was a masterclass in subtext, each partner hiding significant secrets. As they ate, Ethan marveled at Lydia's ability to maintain her facade. He wondered how long she had been perfecting this performance. He also realized, with a mix of pride and sadness, how quickly he had adapted to this new reality. The Ethan of yesterday would have been incapable of such deception. But that Ethan was gone, replaced by a man determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The annual Oceanic City Medical Gala transformed the ballroom of the Seaside Grand Hotel into a glittering sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. Ethan adjusted his bow tie, acutely aware of Lydia on his arm in a slinky red dress. "Ethan." "Lydia. There you are." Julian Reeves approached, champagne flute in hand. His wife, Isabella, a savvy investment banker with a reputation for her sharp intellect, followed close behind. Ethan plastered on a smile. "Julian, Isabella. Good to see you both." The four engaged in tense small talk, an undercurrent of unease running beneath the banal conversation. Ethan couldn't resist dropping subtle hints that made Lydia and Julian squirm. "Julian," Ethan said, swirling his whiskey, "I've been thinking a lot about loyalty lately. In business and in life. Don't you think it's the foundation of any successful partnership?" Julian's smile tightened. "Absolutely. Couldn't agree more." Isabella's eyes darted between the three, her brow furrowing slightly. Ethan could almost see the gears turning in her head as she picked up on the undercurrents. Before the conversation could progress further, Mayor Corinne Zhang approached, looking pale but determined. "Dr. Blackwood, I wanted to thank you personally for your exceptional work." Ethan inclined his head. "I'm just glad you're on the mend, Madam Mayor." "How are you feeling?" "Well enough to make an appearance," Zhang replied with a wry smile. She lowered her voice. "Listen, I wanted to talk to you about Neurotech. My office has been tracking your progress, and we're very interested in a potential partnership." Ethan's eyebrows rose. "A partnership?" Zhang nodded. "One that could fast-track the approval process for your neural implant technology. We believe it could revolutionize healthcare in Oceanic City." The offer was both enticing and concerning. Fast-tracking approvals could mean cutting corners on safety protocols. Ethan felt the weight of ethical compromise pressing down on him. "That's quite an offer, Madam Mayor. I'll need to discuss it with my partners, of course." Zhang smiled. "Of course. We'll be in touch." As she moved away, Ethan excused himself, suddenly overwhelmed by the conflicting emotions and high-stakes conversations. He made his way to the hotel's terrace, gulping in the cool night air. A hushed conversation from a nearby alcove caught his attention. He recognized Julian's voice, along with that of Dr. Elena Rossi, a renowned ethicist. "Need to move forward with Phase 2, Julian was saying. "The board is getting impatient." "And the human trials?" Rossi asked, her tone concerned. "Are you sure they're ready?" "They have to be," Julian replied firmly. "We'll keep them controlled, of course. Minimal risk." Ethan's blood ran cold. What exactly was Phase 2? And what human trials were they discussing? The conversation added another layer of mystery and potential danger to the already complex situation. As he prepared to leave the gala, a visibly troubled Dr. Zara Hassan approached him. "Dr. Blackwood, do you have a moment?" Ethan nodded, noting the worry in her eyes. "What is it, Zara?" She glanced around before speaking in a low voice. "I've noticed some irregularities in recent patient data, particularly in cases related to Neuroteca's preliminary trials. I thought you should know. Ethan's mind raced. Zara's observations connected directly to his growing suspicions about unethical practices within his company. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Zara. We'll discuss this further soon. As Zara walked away, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk about Neurotech. Your office, midnight. Ethan stared at the message, his heart pounding. The mysterious text set the stage for the escalating tension and intrigue that would define the coming days. As he left the gala, Ethan knew that nothing would ever be the same. The descent into darkness had begun, and he was powerless to stop it. The clock on Ethan's nightstand glowed an accusatory 3:17 a.m. as he stared at the ceiling, sleep eluding him. Lydia's steady breathing beside him felt like a betrayal with each rise and fall of her chest. He slipped out of bed, padding silently to his home office. Ethan's fingers flew over the keyboard, his medical training forgotten as he delved into the murky world of digital espionage. He had picked up enough from Neuroteca's IT team over the years to know his way around basic hacking techniques. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. Lydia's cloud storage yielded its secrets like a patient under anesthesia. Ethan's jaw clenched as he uncovered months of intimate correspondence between his wife and Julian. Their affair wasn't just a momentary lapse, it was a calculated, long-term deception. Meeting Jay at the usual spot. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. Read one message from Lydia, dated mere days after Neuroteca's founding. Ethan's stomach churned. He had been pouring his heart and soul into their company, while his wife and best friend plotted behind his back. The depth of their betrayal was staggering. But Ethan knew he needed more. Julian was too smart to leave a clear trail. For that, he needed help. He picked up his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found one he hadn't used in years. Alex and Ari. With a deep breath, he pressed call. Do you have any idea what time it is, Blackwood? Growled a sleep-roughened voice. I need your help, Alex. It's important. There was a pause, then a sigh. This better be good. What do you need? I need you to hack into some encrypted emails. Can you still do that? Alex chuckled darkly. Can a surgeon still cut? Give me the details. As Ethan relayed the information, he felt a twinge of guilt. This wasn't the person he used to be. But then he remembered Lydia in Julian's arms. The old Ethan was gone. This new version would do whatever it took to uncover the truth. Dr. Zara Hassan's eyes widened as she stared at the screen, data scrolling past in an endless stream of damning evidence. Dr. Blackwood, this is... I don't even know what to say. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. He had called Zara to his office under the guise of discussing a complicated case. In reality, he needed someone he could trust, someone with the skills to help him make sense of what he had uncovered. I know it's a lot to take in, Zara. Believe me, I'm still processing it myself. Zara turned to face him, her expression a mix of concern and determination. You realize what this means, don't you? The patient data irregularities I noticed, they're not mistakes. They're deliberate manipulations. Ethan nodded. It gets worse. Look at this. He pulled up a series of emails between Julian and members of Neuroteca's board. The language was carefully coded, but the intent was clear. A coordinated effort to question Ethan's contributions and mental stability, setting the stage for his ouster from the company he had helped build. They're gaslighting you, Zara breathed, horror dawning in her eyes. Precisely. And they're using manipulated research data to do it. Zara's brow furrowed. But why? What could possibly be worth risking everything like this? Ethan's expression darkened. That's what we need to find out. Are you with me? Zara hesitated for only a moment before nodding firmly. All the way, Dr. Blackwood. Where do we start? We dig deeper. Cross-reference the patient data with Neuroteca's experimental treatment protocols. Look for patterns, anomalies, anything out of the ordinary. As they dove into their investigation, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. With Zara's expertise in data analysis and her own experience as a whistleblower in pharmaceutical corruption, they stood a chance of unraveling this web of deceit. Hours passed in a blur of spreadsheets and medical records. Slowly, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Dr. Blackwood, look at this, Zara said, her voice tight with tension. These patients here, in the Phase 2 trials? Their side effect profiles are completely different from what's been reported officially. Ethan leaned in, his heart racing. And the efficacy results? Manipulated. Dramatically overstated in some cases, potential dangers completely omitted in others. Ethan's mind reeling. This is worse than I thought. We're not just talking about corporate espionage anymore. These are serious ethical violations. Zara nodded gravely. And it gets worse. Look at the dates on these files. Ethan's blood ran cold as he realized the implications. These coincide with Dr. Cho's last known appearances before his disappearance. Exactly. And look at the access logs. Dr. Cho viewed these files just hours before he vanished. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture more sinister than Ethan had imagined. He must have discovered what was really going on. He was going to expose them. Zara's face paled. And then he disappeared. The weight of their discovery settled over them like a shroud. This was no longer just about personal betrayal or corporate maneuvering. They were dealing with something far more dangerous. Zara, Ethan said quietly, I think we need to be very careful about who we trust from this point on. This conspiracy, it's bigger than just Julian and Lydia. Zara nodded, her expression determined. Agreed. So what's our next move? Ethan stared out the window, watching the first rays of dawn creep over the horizon. We compile everything we have, every shred of evidence, every anomaly, every connection. And then we figure out how to bring this whole thing down without getting ourselves killed in the process. As they bent back over their work, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were embarking on a path from which there was no return. The descent into darkness had begun in earnest, and he could only hope they would find their way back to the light. The tension in Ethan and Lydia's modernist living room was thick enough to cut with a scalpel. Ethan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the churning Pacific, a tumbler of scotch clutched in his white-knuckled grip. Lydia perched on the edge of the sleek leather sofa, her face a mask of defiance tinged with fear. How long? Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. Lydia's chin lifted. Does it matter? Ethan whirled to face her, his eyes blazing. Does it matter? Are you seriously asking me that, Lydia? How long have you been fucking my best friend and plotting to destroy everything we've built? You want to talk about destroying things? Lydia shot back, her voice rising. How about the way you've been neglecting our marriage for years? Always at the hospital, always in the lab. Did you ever stop to think about what I needed? Ethan's laugh was bitter. Oh, that's rich. I was working my ass off to build a future for us, to change the world with our research. And all the while, you were spreading your legs for Julian and helping him steal it all away. Lydia flinched as if slapped, but her eyes hardened. You don't understand. It wasn't like that. Julian, he saw me. He listened. When was the last time you really looked at me, Ethan? I'm looking now, Ethan snarled. And you know what I see? A liar. A cheat. A corporate spy who's been selling out our company's secrets. Lydia's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. It's not that simple. You don't know everything. Then enlighten me, Ethan spat. Lydia took a deep, shuddering breath. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them, a bombshell that shattered what was left of Ethan's world. What? He whispered, all the fight draining out of him. I'm pregnant, Lydia repeated, her voice barely audible. And I don't know who the father is. Ethan staggered back as if physically struck. The implications crashed over him in waves. Not just his wife and his company, but potentially his child. Everything he thought he knew, everything he had built his life around, was crumbling beneath his feet. Before he could formulate a response, the front door burst open. Julian strode in, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. Lydia, are you all right? I came as soon as I got your message. Julian's eyes darted between Ethan and Lydia, taking in the scene. His expression shifted from concern to a practiced mask of contrition. Ethan, I know this looks bad, but we need to talk about this rationally. What happened? It was a mistake. A regrettable lapse in judgment. But it doesn't have to destroy everything we've built. Ethan's laugh was hollow. A mistake? Is that what you call months of deception? Years of manipulating data and planning to push me out of my own company. Julian's eyes widened fractionally before his smooth facade reasserted itself. I don't know what you think you know, Ethan, but you're not thinking clearly. We can work this out. For the sake of Neurotech, for all the good we can do with our research, we need to handle this discreetly. Discreetly? Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. Like how you've been handling those human trials. The ones with all the conveniently unreported side effects. Julian's composure cracked for a moment, a flash of ruthless ambition showing through. You don't understand the bigger picture, Ethan. What we're doing, it's going to change the world. A few ethical gray areas are a small price to pay for the advancement of human evolution. Lydia gasped, looking at Julian with dawning horror. What are you talking about? What have you done? Julian opened his mouth to respond, but was cut off by the shrill ring of Ethan's phone. Ethan answered, his eyes never leaving Julian's face. Dr. Blackwood? It's Dr. Patel from the ER. Mayor Zhang has been admitted with some very concerning symptoms. We need you here immediately. Ethan's blood ran cold as he listened to the description of the mayor's condition. It matched point for point the undisclosed side effects of Neuroteca's experimental treatment. I'm on my way, he said, ending the call. As Ethan grabbed his keys, he overheard Julian murmuring to Lydia, "Don't worry, everything will be taken care of soon." The ominous words, combined with Julian's earlier threats, filled Ethan with a sense of foreboding. As he raced to the hospital, his mind whirled with the implications. The unethical trials had reached beyond their controlled experiments, affecting one of the most high-profile individuals in the city. The stakes had just been raised exponentially, and Ethan knew he was running out of time to uncover the full truth and protect his patients. As he sped through the night, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger, more dangerous game. The emergency room of Oceanic Memorial Hospital was a whirlwind of activity as Ethan burst through the doors. Nurses and orderlies scattered in his wake as he made a beeline for the private room where Mayor Corinne Zhang had been admitted. Dr. Patel, a seasoned ER physician, met him at the door. "Dr. Blackwood, thank God you're here. Her condition is deteriorating rapidly, and we can't pinpoint the cause." Ethan's jaw clenched as he reviewed the mayor's chart. Every symptom, every anomaly, matched perfectly with a confidential list of side effects from Neuroteca's neural implant trials. His mind raced, torn between his duty as a doctor and the need to keep the connection to Neurotech under wraps. "Start her on a cocktail of neuroprotective agents," Ethan ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "And prep Thor. We may need to go in and physically remove the implant." As the medical team scrambled to follow his instructions, Ethan felt a hand on his arm. He turned to find Dr. Zara Hassan, her eyes wide with urgency. "Dr. Blackwood, we need to talk. Now." They ducked into an empty consultation room, Zara's fingers flying over her tablet as she pulled up a series of documents. "I found something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's evidence of a secret lab facility off the books. Unauthorized human trials, Ethan. On a scale we never imagined." Ethan's blood ran cold as he scanned the data. Signatures, video evidence, all pointing to Julian and Lydia's direct involvement in overseeing these unethical experiments. "My God," he breathed. "How deep does this go?" Before Zara could respond, the door burst open. Detective Marcus Ortiz strode in, flanked by two uniformed officers. "Dr. Ethan Blackwood," Ortiz said, his voice gruff. "I have a warrant to search your office and seize any relevant documents or electronic devices." Ethan's mind reeled. "On what grounds?" Ortiz's eyes narrowed. "We received an anonymous tip implicating you in the disappearance of Dr. Victor Cho and in the unauthorized medical trials conducted by Neurotech. You're going to need to come with us for questioning." The realization hit Ethan like a physical blow. He was being framed, and he had a pretty good idea who was behind it. As if on cue, Ethan's phone buzzed with an incoming video call. Julian's face filled the screen, a triumphant smirk playing at his lips. "Oh, old friend," Julian drawled. "Enjoying your evening?" The camera panned, revealing a luxurious mountain retreat. Lydia sat in the background, her expression unreadable. "You bastard," Ethan hissed. "You set me up." Julian's laugh was cold. "Oh, Ethan, always so quick to judge. This has been in motion for months. The manipulated data, the whispers to the board about your instability, even turning a few key members of the hospital staff. You never stood a chance." Ethan's mind raced, trying to process the depth of the betrayal. Why, Julian? What could possibly be worth all this? Progress, Ethan. Unfettered scientific advancement. The kind that will propel humanity into a new era. And if a few ethical lines need to be crossed along the way, well, that's a small price to pay, isn't it? As Julian spoke, Ethan noticed something in Lydia's eyes. A flicker of, was it regret? Doubt? Julian continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Don't worry about Lydia, by the way. I'll take good care of her and our little bundle of joy." At the mention of the pregnancy, Lydia's face contorted. For a split second, Ethan saw a flash of the woman he had fallen in love with, trapped behind a mask of complicity. "You won't get away with this," Ethan growled. Julian's smile was shark-like. "But I already have. Goodbye, Ethan. Do try to enjoy your stay in custody." The call ended, leaving Ethan staring at a blank screen. He turned to find Ortiz watching him, eyebrows raised. "Care to explain what that was all about, Doc?" Ethan's mind raced. He knew that anything he said now would likely be used against him. But as he opened his mouth to speak, alarms blared from Mayor Zhang's room. "She's coding," a nurse shouted. In that moment, Ethan made a choice. He might be going down, but he'd be damned if he let a patient die because of Julian's machinations. "Detective," he said, his voice steady, "I know how this looks. But right now, there's a woman dying in there, and I'm the only one who knows how to save her. Let me do my job, and then I'm all yours." Ortiz hesitated for a long moment before nodding curtly. "Make it quick, document. And don't even think about trying anything funny." As Ethan rushed to save the mayor's life, his mind whirled with the implications of everything that had just transpired. He was being framed, his life's work was in jeopardy, and the woman he loved was embroiled in a conspiracy more vast and insidious than he had ever imagined. But as he entered the mayor's room, Ethan locked eyes with Dr. Zara Hassan. In that silent exchange, a message passed between them. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the medical team worked frantically to stabilize Mayor Zhang, Ethan knew that his fight was just beginning. The descent into darkness was complete, but somewhere in that darkness, a spark of resistance had been ignited. And Ethan Blackwood was not a man who went down without a fight. The stark fluorescent lights of the holding cell cast harsh shadows across Ethan's face. He sat on the hard metal bench, his mind racing through the events that had led him to this point. The betrayal, the conspiracy, the frame-up, it all seemed like a nightmare from which he couldn't wake. The sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor snapped him out of his reverie. Keys jangled, and the cell doors swung open. Ethan looked up, expecting to see Detective Ortiz or perhaps his court-appointed lawyer. Instead, he found himself staring into the sharp, calculating eyes of Isabella Reeves. "Hello, Dr. Blackwood," she said, her voice cool and controlled. "I believe we have much to discuss." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Mrs. Reeves? What are you doing here?" Isabella glanced over her shoulder before stepping into the cell, the door closing behind her with a metallic clang. "I'm here to offer you a deal, Dr. Blackwood. One that could save both our skins." Ethan leaned forward, intrigued despite his wariness. "I'm listening." Isabella's eyes glittered with a mix of determination and something darker, perhaps fear. "I've been suspicious of Julian's activities for months. The late-night calls, the unexplained absences, the discrepancies in Neuroteca's financials. At first, I thought he was simply having an affair. But the truth, as I'm sure you discovered, is far more sinister." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a sleek tablet. "I've been conducting my own investigation. What I've found, well, let's just say it goes far beyond Neurotech." Ethan's heart raced as Isabella swiped through a series of documents on the screen. Offshore bank accounts, shell companies, connections to known organized crime figures. The web of corruption was vast and intricate. "Why are you showing me this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Isabella's gaze met his, unflinching. "Because I need your help to bring it all down. In exchange, I'll help clear your name. You have the medical expertise and the insider knowledge of Neurotech. I have the financial acumen and the resources. Together, we might stand a chance." Ethan studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, he nodded slowly. "All right, Mrs. Reeves, you have a deal." As Isabella outlined the beginnings of their plan, Ethan couldn't help but wonder about the other players in this intricate game. What was Dr. Zara Hassan doing now? And Detective Ortiz, was he truly convinced of Ethan's guilt, or did he harbor his own doubts? Across town, in a dimly lit corner of a 24-hour diner, Dr. Zara Hassan nursed a cold cup of coffee. Her eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, her usually neat ponytail disheveled. Across from her sat Detective Marcus Ortiz, his weathered face etched with lines of concern. "Run it by me again, Doc," Ortiz said, his gruff voice low. "What exactly did you find in those patient files?" Zara leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Inconsistencies, Detective. Lots of them. Side effects that were never reported, efficacy results that seemed too good to be true." And then there's this. She slid a folder across the table. Ortiz opened it, his eyes widening as he scanned the contents. These dates, he muttered. They line up perfectly with Dr. Cho's last known appearances. Zara finished for him. Exactly. Whatever he found, whatever he was about to expose, I think this is it. Ortiz ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking every one of his 50-plus years. Christ, if what you're saying is true, this goes way beyond a simple disappearance case. We're talking about a conspiracy that could reach the highest levels of the hospital, maybe even city government. Zara nodded. That's why I came to you, Detective. I don't know who else to trust. Dr. Blackwood, Ethan, he's not behind this. He's being set up. I'm sure of it. Ortiz studied her for a long moment before nodding. All right, document. I believe you. But we're going to need more than just suspicions if we're going to help your boss. We need hard evidence. So where do we start? A determined glint appeared in Ortiz's eye. We start by retracing Dr. Cho's steps. Something tells me the key to this whole mess lies in figuring out what happened to him. As they bent their heads together, formulating a plan, neither noticed the dark-suited figure watching them from a booth across the diner, a phone pressed to his ear. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when the gates of the county jail swung open. Ethan stepped out, blinking in harsh morning light. His suit was rumpled, his face unshaven, but his eyes burned with a newfound determination. Dr. Blackwood. Ethan turned to see a sleek black town car idling at the curb. The back door opened, and Mayor Corinne Zhang emerged, looking far healthier than when he'd last seen her in the hospital. Madam Mayor? Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. What are you doing here? Zhang's lips curved in a wry smile. Picking up my get-out-of-jail-free card, it would seem. Please get in. We have much to discuss. As the car pulled away from the curb, Zhang fixed Ethan with an intense gaze. I suppose you're wondering how I recovered so quickly. And why I'm here. Ethan nodded, his mind whirling with possibilities. The truth is, Dr. Blackwood, I was never truly ill. At least, not in the way you think. Zhang's voice was steady, but Ethan could detect a hint of steel beneath the calm exterior. I've suspected for months that something was rotten within Neurotech. When I heard whispers of experimental treatments being fast-tracked, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Ethan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You deliberately underwent the treatment. To draw out the real culprits. Zhang nodded. Precisely. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly things would spiral out of control. Or that you would end up taking the fall. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. I'm here to offer you a partnership, Dr. Blackwood. My political influence, combined with your medical expertise together, we could reshape this city's healthcare system. Root out the corruption and build something truly revolutionary. Ethan felt a mix of admiration and wariness. The offer was tempting, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being manipulated once again. And what's in it for you, Madam Mayor? Zhang's smile was razor-sharp. A legacy, Dr. Blackwood. A chance to be remembered as the woman who ushered in a new era of medical innovation and ethical governance. And, of course, the not insignificant boost to my re-election campaign. Ethan weighed his options. On one hand, partnering with Zhang could give him the resources and protection he needed to expose the truth. On the other, he risked compromising his ethics even further. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Pier 17. 1 hour. Bring the mayor. Ethan's pulse quickened. Isabella. Whatever she had planned, it was clear that things were about to come to a head. He turned to Zhang, decision made. Madam Mayor, I think it's time you met some friends of mine. We're going to need all the allies we can get for what comes next. As the town car changed direction, heading towards the waterfront, Ethan felt a surge of nervous energy. The pieces were falling into place. The unlikely alliance of a disgraced neurosurgeon, a cunning mayor, a brilliant resident, a jaded detective, and a scorned wife was about to take on a conspiracy that reached into the very heart of Oceanic City. The final confrontation was approaching, and Ethan knew that when the dust settled, nothing would ever be the same. The air at Pier 17 was thick with salt and tension. Ethan stood at the edge of the dock, Mayor Zhang at his side. The first rays of sunlight glinted off the choppy waters of the harbor, casting long shadows across the weathered planks. Dr. Blackwood. Ethan turned to see Isabella Reeves approaching, her heels clicking against the wooden boards. Behind her, to his surprise, were Dr. Zara Hassan and Detective Ortiz. Quite the gathering you've assembled, Zhang murmured, eyeing the newcomers warily. Ethan nodded, his gaze sweeping over the unlikely group. I think it's time we all laid our cards on the table. We're up against something bigger than any of us realized. And if we're going to have any chance of stopping it, we need to work together. For the next hour, information flowed freely. Isabella shared her financial findings, revealing the extent of Julian's illegal operations. Zara and Ortiz presented their evidence linking Neurotech to Dr. Cho's disappearance and the unauthorized human trials. Mayor Zhang detailed her own investigation and suspicions. As the full picture emerged, Ethan felt a mix of horror and determination. The conspiracy reached far beyond Neurotech, implicating high-ranking hospital administrators, city officials, and even members of the police force. So what's our next move? Ortiz asked, his gruff voice breaking the stunned silence that had fallen over the group. He thought of the patients who had suffered, of Dr. Cho who had disappeared trying to expose the truth, of his own journey from naive idealist to hardened fighter. Whatever happened next, Ethan knew there was no going back. The reckoning had begun. The mountain road twisted and turned, each bend bringing Ethan and his unlikely allies closer to the final confrontation. As Isabella's SUV rounded a corner, Julian and Lydia's secluded vacation home came into view. The modernist structure of glass and steel seemed to grow out of the rugged landscape, a monument to wealth and hubris. Remember the plan, Ethan said, his voice taut with tension. Isabella and I will enter through the front. Zara, you and Ortiz secure the perimeter. Mayor Zhang will coordinate with local authorities from the command center we set up down the road. As they approached the house, an eerie silence settled over the group. The property appeared deserted, but Ethan knew better than to trust appearances. Julian had always been one step ahead. There was no reason to think this time would be any different. Ethan and Isabella made their way to the front door, adrenaline coursing through their veins. To their surprise, the door swung open at Isabella's touch. I don't like this, Ethan muttered. It's too easy. They moved cautiously through the house, every sense on high alert. As they descended into the basement, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Before them lay a state-of-the-art laboratory, filled with servers and medical equipment far beyond anything that should have been in a private residence. Isabella immediately set to work on the main computer terminal. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, breaking through layers of encryption with practiced ease. My God, she whispered, her eyes widening as she scanned the data scrolling across the screen. Ethan, it's worse than we thought. They're not just running unauthorized trials. They're trafficking people for these experiments. Homeless individuals, undocumented immigrants, anyone who won't be missed. Ethan's stomach churned as he looked at the files. The scope of the operation was staggering, reaching far beyond Oceanic City. A muffled sound from upstairs made them both freeze. We need to move, Ethan hissed. Download everything you can. We need to get this to Zhang and Ortiz. But before Isabella could complete the transfer, the basement door burst open. Julian strode in, flanked by a group of armed men whose dead eyes and military bearings screamed mercenary. Ethan, old friend, Julian said, his voice dripping with false warmth. And Isabella, my dear. What an unpleasant surprise. Ethan's mind raced, searching for a way out. But Julian held all the cards. I must say, I'm impressed by your persistence, Julian continued, circling them like a predator. But did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies in place? That I wouldn't be monitoring my own home? He produced a small device from his pocket. One press of this button, and every dirty little secret in the city gets uploaded to the cloud. Every backroom deal, every covered-up scandal. Including some of your own ethically questionable decisions, Ethan. Are you ready for the world to see just how far you were willing to go in the name of scientific progress? Ethan's blood ran cold. He had always justified his actions as necessary evils in pursuit of the greater good. But now, faced with the prospect of those decisions being laid bare, he felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. The tense standoff was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. Lydia burst into the room, her face a mask of determination. It's over, Julian, she said, her voice steady. I've been working with a federal task force. They have everything. Julian's composure cracked, revealing the ruthless ambition that had driven him all along. You betrayed me? After everything we've built. Lydia's laugh was bitter. Built? You've destroyed everything, Julian. The company, our relationships, countless lives. It ends now. In the chaos that followed, Julian made a desperate grab for a hard drive. Ethan, running on pure instinct, gave chase. They burst out of the house, racing towards the cliff's edge that overlooked the churning ocean below. As they grappled to the precipice, Ethan found himself face to face with a man who had once been his best friend. In Julian's eyes, he saw a twisted reflection of his own ambition, a glimpse of what he might have become if he had made different choices. "It's not too late, Ethan," Julian panted, his grip on the hard drive white-knuckled. "Think of what we could achieve together. Reshaping human evolution itself. We could be gods." For a moment, Ethan felt the pull of that vision. The chance to push the boundaries of science, to leave an indelible mark on human history. But then he thought of the patients who had suffered, of the lives destroyed in pursuit of that dream. "No, Julian," Ethan said, his voice firm. "That's not who I am anymore. That's not who I want to be." As they struggled, Julian's foot slipped on the rain-slick rock. Time seemed to slow as he teetered on the edge of the cliff. In that split second, Ethan made a choice that would define the man he had become. He reached out, trying to grab Julian's arm. But Julian, seeing the inevitability of his defeat, let go. As he fell towards the churning waves below, Ethan saw a flash of something in his former friend's eyes. Was it regret, acceptance, or simply the final, stubborn refusal to face the consequences of his actions? The sound of Julian's body hitting the water was lost in the roar of the surf. Ethan stood at the cliff's edge, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on him. The hard drive Julian had been clutching was now in Ethan's hand, its contents potentially the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. Ethan turned away from the churning waters, his mind already racing with the next steps. The fight wasn't over, far from it. There was still a vast network of corruption to dismantle, victims to help, and a personal reckoning to face. As he made his way back to the house, Ethan was met by Detective Ortiz, his weathered face a mask of determination. "Julian?" Ortiz asked, though the look in his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. Ethan shook his head. He chose to let go. Ortiz nodded, not pressing further. "We've secured the premises and detained the mercenaries. Mayor Zhang's people are on their way to take custody of the evidence." Inside the house, the scene was controlled chaos. Isabella was coordinating with a team of cybersecurity experts, ensuring that every scrap of data was properly cataloged and secured. Zara was tending to a shaken Lydia, who sat wrapped in a blanket, her eyes haunted. As Ethan approached, Lydia looked up, her expression a complex mix of emotions. "Ethan, there's so much I need to explain." Ethan held up a hand, cutting her off. "Not now, Lydia. We have work to do." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Ethan worked tirelessly with federal authorities, using his medical expertise to help identify and treat the victims of Neuroteca's illegal experiments. Each life saved, each wrong righted, felt like a step towards redemption. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Hospital board members, city council representatives, even some within the police force, the rot ran deep. But with the evidence secured from Julian's lair, the house of cards began to collapse. Through it all, Ethan found an unexpected source of strength in Dr. Zara Hassan. Her unwavering support and sharp intellect proved invaluable as they navigated the complex web of medical ethics and legal challenges. One evening, as they pored over patient files in Ethan's makeshift office, Lydia appeared in the doorway. She looked smaller somehow, the weight of her actions evident in the slump of her shoulders. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, following her to a quiet corner of the building. Zara squeezed his arm as he passed, a silent gesture of support. Lydia took a deep breath. "I know nothing I say can justify what I did. But you have to understand, I was in deep before I realized how far Julian was willing to go. The pregnancy, it was a lie. A way to buy time while I gathered evidence for the federal task force." Ethan listened, his face impassive. Part of him wanted to rage at her, to demand answers for every betrayal, every lie. But he found that the anger that had fueled him for so long had burned out, leaving only a tired acceptance in its wake. "I appreciate your help in bringing Julian down," Ethan said finally. "But whatever we had, it's gone, Lydia. Too much has happened. Too many lines have been crossed." Lydia nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I understand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything." As she walked away, Ethan felt a chapter of his life closing. The man he had been naive, trusting, driven by personal ambition was gone. In his place stood someone new, tempered by betrayal and ethical compromise, but ultimately recommitted to the values that had drawn him to medicine in the first place. In the months that followed, Ethan threw himself into the task of rebuilding. With Dr. Zahra Hassan by his side, he established a new medical research institute focused on ethical advancements in neurotechnology. Their aim was to continue pushing the boundaries of science, but with rigorous oversight and transparent practices. The institute quickly gained a reputation for cutting-edge research combined with unwavering ethical standards. Ethan found a new sense of purpose in mentoring young scientists, instilling in them the importance of balancing scientific curiosity with moral responsibility. One crisp autumn morning, as Ethan and Zahra were reviewing proposals for a new project, a familiar face appeared in their office doorway. Dr. Blackwood, Dr. Hassan, Detective Ortiz said, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Got a minute? Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyebrow raised. What can we do for you, Detective? Ortiz tossed a file onto the desk. Got a case that might interest you. Seems someone's been using advanced biotechnology to enhance athletic performance. We're talking cellular-level modifications, way beyond anything we've seen before. Zahra leaned forward, her eyes scanning the file with keen interest. This is remarkable and deeply concerning. Ethan felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. The thrill of a new challenge, the chance to use their unique combination of medical expertise and investigative skills to make a difference. He shared a look with Zahra, seeing his own excitement mirrored in her eyes. What do you say, Dr. Hassan? Ready to dive into another mystery? Zahra's grin was answer enough. As they began to discuss the case with Ortiz, Ethan felt a sense of contentment settle over him. The path ahead was uncertain, full of new challenges and potential pitfalls. But he was no longer the man who could be blindsided by betrayal or tempted by unethical shortcuts. Whatever came next, Ethan knew he would face it with clear eyes and a steadfast commitment to using his knowledge for the greater good. The dark days of neurotech were behind him, but the lessons learned would guide him forward into a future bright with possibility. As Ortiz laid out the details of the case, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. The adventure, it seemed, was far from over. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.